When you're looking for a job, you need two things, two important tools for your disposal. One is a kick-ass resume. The other one is to be able to nail that interview. And Sheila Musgrove can tell you how to do both of those things. She's the author of the book Hired and Unexpected Mentors. Sheila, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. Let's go to that first big key. You're probably not getting the interview if you don't have a great resume. What makes a great resume these days?
Awesome question. A great resume is, well, let me tell you what a great resume isn't, because that's what most people do. Most people make the big mistake of filling their resume with 2 or 3 or more pages of bullets that describe your functional job responsibilities. That's the big mistake everyone makes. And as you can see, 80% of resumes are rejected in 11 seconds. And in double-digit unemployment, where we are in many parts of the country now, it's even more challenging. So you're going to get less than 11 seconds. So a resume that's filled with 2 or 3 pages of bullets does not cut it. So I wrote a formula in my book, Hired, that has helped job seekers around the world to land their new zippy gig. The formula that I wrote about, it talks all about results. And sure, a hiring manager wants to know what your job is or was, but more importantly, they want to know how well you did your job. And that's what my formula is all about.
So let's get to the formula in just one
Okay.
second. I just want to go back to the don'ts. Like 3-page resume is probably a don't to start with off the bat, right?
Right. There are times when if you fill your resume according to the formula that we'll talk about, 3 pages can be okay. But we don't want to go the one thing, we don't want to give away ages on our resume. So if you go back further than 10, maximum 15 years, of course, if you go back to the beginning of time, you're definitely going to be a long, long resume. So you don't want to do that. Maximum 3 pages. 2
Right.
is perfect. 3 is okay when you've got a bit more experience. But yeah, we don't want to give away our age.
No, I think my first resume was on a stone tablet. So let's go to the formula. What is the formula for that resume?
Sure. The formula is 2 steps. Step 1, it is answering the questions in 1 to 3 sentences, which are, what level did you report to? So the title, what level did you report to? Briefly, succinctly, what is or was your job? What's your scope? How many other people did what you did? Answer those questions, 1 to 3 sentences. And then step 2 is where the magic is. I want you to write the words key successes, key achievements, whatever words resonate with you, bold, underline, because in those 11 seconds, the hiring manager who's reading your resume, they're going to slow down because they will see those words repeated under every one of your positions. Key successes, key achievements, whatever words resonate, bold, underline, and that's where bullets are okay. And what I want you to do before you delete every one of your bullets, I want you to ask yourself, is there something I can measure here? Is there a number, percentage, ranking? I want you to think about all of the quantifiable results that are on your resume. Think about if you've had old performance reviews where you've been recognized. Think about promotions, anything that you can validate to show a hiring manager where you've been successful in the past. Ultimately, that's what a hiring manager is after. If you've been successful in each and every one of your positions, well, odds are you're probably going to find a way to be successful in your next job. So if you can demonstrate those results on your resume, you become the candidate that's really easy to be hired. And the bonus will be interviews will be a breeze.
So let's go back to quantifiable. I mean, successes there, I'm sure people can look at and say, I've had a promotion, I had this in a job review, this project went well. Quantifiable is the one I think people have problems with in different jobs. What are some examples of ways people can quantify their successes?
Absolutely. Again, for every number, think about, is there a number, percentage, ranking that you can associate with? Random examples, as you and I talked about. For example, a receptionist. Most receptionists will have on their resume, I answered all of the incoming calls. Well, that's not a very flashy statement, but if you can say I answered 175 average calls, incoming calls per day, transferred to 22 memorized extensions with a 0% fall off rate. Well, that's a good number. So think about where you can measure. If you are, think about safety, think about timing, think about how many, how much, how big, how much, how many for every bullet that's on your resume.
Right. I know I'm going to give you a few examples from
Yeah.
mine. Some are obvious, some are less obvious. When I was at Discovery Channel, I had the highest rated show series in the channel's history when I left. Fifth highest rated program of any type, highest rated Canadian program. Those seem obvious to me. When I went to another one, there weren't as gaudy numbers like that, and ratings didn't matter as much because we didn't get as big numbers. But
Hmm.
I oversaw a team of three.
Hmm.
Three teams that produced a series every year, and I oversaw 160 hours of outside content. Are those good measures?
Yes.
Right,
Absolutely. If you don't put a number down, then it will assume it's one. So you might have been on air for 15 minutes. That might have
right.
been your 15 minutes of fame. Not true. So
Mhm.
think about, yeah, how many broadcast hours, how many shows did you do? And you're right. Not every position has a boatload of numbers, but those are all really good numbers to think about.
Now we're going to get to the interview, because you said your successes and your numbers are going to lead into the interview. I'm going to sidebar for 1 second for an
Mhm.
experience that I've had with my resume, and that's I've put the volunteer experience I've had down there. Like, I'm in charge of house league at East York baseball. I'm an assistant coach at East York hockey. I'm surprised at how often in an interview somebody would look at that and say, "Oh, you do this volunteer work. How important is that stuff?"
That's a really great question. Volunteer work is most often completely understated. So the part that it's great, you would position it exactly as you would any other position on your resume. So I want to know, what month and year did you start to present? The key part is, how many volunteer hours per week or per month
Hmm.
are you doing? Because if you don't indicate, I'll assume, great, you might have gone to that baseball game and tossed out the opening pitch and then you left. So if you don't indicate how many hours, and a lot of volunteer work is incredibly important and a significant amount of time. Although that may not be related to your career, it shows an employer community involvement. In your case, it's coaching kids and team sports. There's all kinds of wonderful attributes to take away from volunteer work, but always indicate how many hours per month, per year you are volunteering. And as well, same, were there any specific achievements? Did you coach that team to a highest ranking? Did Were they the winning team out of how many other teams? So think about results in the same way on volunteer work.
Yeah, my result for coaching was all my kids came back the next year.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was always my measure of success for house league. Um,
Absolutely.
Let me get into interviewing. Now,
Okay.
you've set up your resume for your successes, for your quantifiable achievements. How does that lead into the interview?
Excellent question. And I remember sitting in my home office where I am now when I was writing the hired chapter on interviewing, and I had my fingers on the keyboard and I thought, why do people find interviewing so difficult when in fact it's really, really easy? And then it was a lightning bolt. And here it is. When a hiring manager says to you, tell me about your most recent position and previous, for each position, what they're actually looking for are the answer to 5 questions, but they don't ask them. How crazy is that? We will just say, tell me about your position, and we leave it there. And we hope that you're going to tell us something really interesting. And most people don't. In my book, I call it the meandering out of body experience. And I always say to candidates, as painful as it is for you to listen, to go through that question, yeah, it's equally as painful for the hiring manager to listen to you trying to pin together those 2 or 3 pages of bullets. So here's the 5 questions. When we ask you about your role, what we're after: what level did you report to? What is or was your job? What's your scope? How many other people did what you did? And were you successful? So it's the two-step resume formula. So here, if you take the time to write your resume in that formula, you've got all the answers to the test. You've already got a blueprint to walk into an interview and and be the candidate that is a standout because you've got almost a script on what it is that you want to review and what you want to share in an interview.
So here's my mom tip. This is the tip
Okay.
my mom gave me before I started interviewing. She said, write down all the things you're really good at on a piece of paper, just the things you're good at. Take it with you, and before you go in, just read it over and over and over again. A, so that's fresh in your mind, and B, so that it pumps you up.
Absolutely.
What do you think of my mom's advice?
I love mom's advice. That's great. Absolutely. Great advice from mom. Really, really good advice. And further to that, to prepare for an interview, the worst thing you can do is say, you know what, I live this, it's my background. I'm just going to walk into that interview and wing it. Do not do that. It's the same. Think of this. This is a presentation on you. You wouldn't go in front of an audience of 500 people and standing on a stage without figuring out what you want to say beforehand. So same as the interview, you need to do some really solid prep before you walk into that interview. And what you need to do is rehearse walking through your entire resume. Know every single interview you walk into, you have to do that. And most candidates say, I want off that question as fast as I can. That's a mistake, because here's where you really can be a standout. So rehearse walking through your resume out loud. Again, answering those 5 questions. Answer those 5 questions, rehearse it out loud. The reason you want to rehearse out loud, it commits it to your short-term memory. One of my coaching clients earlier this week said, and I went through exactly the same advice. She emailed me this morning and said, thank goodness I did rehearse out loud. It was a panel interview of 6 people. Now, I'm sure everyone walking into an interview, if it's a panel of 6 people, your nerves are going to go. Your blood pressure is going to go up. You're going to be a bit nervous very naturally. So here's the benefit of rehearsing out loud. If you rehearse out loud, it commits everything to your short-term memory. And it's kind of a cool brain thing. When you rehearse out loud, everything's sitting in your short-term memory, and your short-term memory never fails you in that type of pressure situation. If you just read your resume and think, okay, good, I'm good, everything's still sitting in your long-term memory. And if the interviewer says to you, great, tell me what position you were in 10 years ago, your answer probably is going to be, gosh, 10 years ago is a long time. I can't remember. The minute you say, I can't remember, the interview's over.
Does it matter how close in time to the interview that you say it out loud?
I think that's a really good question. And I would say I would definitely make sure you're rehearsing it the night before, and probably just do another quick check in with yourself the day of the interview and just say, okay, right, here's what I'm going to say. I've got it. It's top of mind. So definitely within the day.
I'll tell you the interview is over that I've seen in person more than once, when somebody's taken a phone call during the interview.
Don't do that. Yes, it's happened. It has happened. And worse, not enough if your phone rings, but definitely don't answer it. Just apologize and tuck your phone away. But yeah, definitely don't do that.
I remember just thinking, well, this is over. Here's my own advice for interviewing. I always treated it the way I used to treat blind dates. I figured the secret to a blind date was, I'm going to have fun no matter what. And at least they'll like me or not like me for who I am. And I started treating interviews the same way. And not only did they become less stressful, I think the other people had a good time too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great advice. Absolutely great advice. And just on that line, I wrote in my book, the mindset of going into an interview, walk into the interview with the mindset that they're trying to find every single reason to hire you. They've already loved what they've seen on your resume. You've gone through the phone interview. You're in alignment. That hiring manager is really hoping that you're it, because at the end of the day, they want to stop interviewing, get you in, get you trained, and have everyone get on with their jobs at hand in reaching their goals. In years gone by, I mean, there were all sorts of weird ways to interview, and there'd be weird questions that would be asked. I mean, really, the way people interview now, it's more about your results, what you have done, and they really want to find every reason to hire you. And that's a much nicer way to go into an interview. That and your mom's advice, of course.
My mom is so smart. I don't want her to watch this to know how much I listen to her, but she really does have good advice. Age, a lot of
Okay.
people being let go in their 50s, like I am.
Mhm.
Uh, Hard to get a resume through. Ageism is a thing. How do you get around that?
Perfect. The first thing is make sure that you are not, we'll get to age, but you raised a really good point. The word let go actually should not be used when you're laid off. The word layoff is very different than let go. Let go actually to a hiring manager means you were fired, you were terminated. Now, terminations happen to good people all the time.
Mhm.
Own the story in the interview, but just make sure you're using the right word. Layoff, if it was a layoff, then indicate what was happening in the company. So the organization, the channel was going through significant layoffs. We've reduced our workforce by 50% in the last 2 years. Here's what happened to my position. So if you were laid off, make sure you're using the word layoff. In the interview, walk the interviewer through what happened. If it was, and here's where my mom comes in. I wrote a chapter in my book called The Big T: Terminations and Other Tough Conversations. The byline was, have you been canned like my mom Betty's pickled beets? And I took a picture of her pickled beets. So if you were the big T, that's a tough conversation. Get comfortable with it. What happened? Own it. If it was your error, something you did, own it, but know that you'll have to talk about it in an interview. So get comfortable with that conversation as well. And as well, I wrote it in my book, terminations happen to good people. One of the other candidates I coached, he was with an organization for 7 years, progressed. His last position, vice president of marketing, new C-suite came in. They didn't get along. Boom, he was out. And certainly when he came to see me, he was very deflated, of course. But when we identified and worked through his resume, showing all of his amazing successes, well, that termination became really a distant conversation in all of his future interviews because he had been so successful. And it was clear that it was just a personality clash. And that happens. So
Mhm.
the big T, so a sidebar. Now back to the question you asked about ageism. So a few things that are dead giveaways on age. One, going back to the beginning of time on your resume. So don't go back. Definitely, remember, the year 2000 was 21 years ago. So definitely make sure you don't have any 80s or 90s dates. They were amazing eras, and I love them.
There's
But
so much good stuff in there.
there was. But make sure you don't have old dates. And again,
So just
15
take
years.
dates out. You can put the
If
jobs in there, just don't put any dates with them.
Well, now the job you were doing 20 years ago is probably not the job you want to be doing next. So I would cut your career history off at 15. If that's in the middle of a position, okay, go 16, 17. But again, we don't want to go back to the beginning of time. Another candidate I was coaching, he's been with the same station for 20 years. So in his case, he did have to go back 20 years. But be careful, don't go back to the beginning of time. Now, education, make sure that your degree, diploma, certificates, they always stay on, but the date of graduation comes off. So education stays, dates come off. And I always say to people who are newer to their career or even 15 years in that still have the date of high school graduation on their resume, take that off. You're just telling someone exactly how old you are. So take the high school graduation date off. Another one, do not put your year of birth in your email address. So that's a dead giveaway. Don't do that. Or, something obvious like, bob52@gmail.com. Well, chances are, yeah, Bob, you're either born in 52 or you're 52. So stay away from ages and numbers that give away your age. The other, a lot of people will lead with a headline at the top of their resume, 30 years of broadcast experience, 30 years of experience. Don't do that. It can work against you. And the
Guilty.
person, yeah. So the person reading your resume, they might not even be 30. And of course, then they're like, and oftentimes it is a junior person that is pre-screening your resume. And they'll think, my goodness, who's going to, this person is old.
This guy's
So don't
career could
lead.
be my dad.
Right? Or
Right.
one could be yeah. And gosh, I think my dad's old. So don't do any of those age things. So keep the dates current, Keep years, any suspicious years off your resume. Take the dates of graduation off, but school always remains on.
All right, this is all great. I have one more question to ask you because you're
Yeah.
actually going to settle a discussion with my wife and I, and it's the terminology.
Okay.
I have always thought that laid off was sort of like you work at the factory, there's a layoff because they have to close a line, but you're going to be called back. I always thought a layoff implied you're just off for now. We're going to bring you back later. What does that actually mean?
Great question, and I can see that perspective in the city that I'm in, which is Calgary. We've been through some severe economic downturn. So the word layoff actually does mean that something has happened externally with the company, economy factors, loss of a client, something happened to the organization that resulted in they have to lay off their staff. It was nothing that the individual has done, which would then be the termination, let go, fired. The layoff means it was nothing to do with what you were doing. It was everything to do with really what was happening with the company, profitability, etc.
So let go means it was your fault.
Yep.
Fired
Yes.
means it was your fault.
Yes.
And what about
Termination.
termination? Packaged out?
Yeah, package does mean that it was a layoff. Again, it was nothing you
Right.
did. It was the company had to make financial decisions, and part of that was a package out. So that's fine. That's fine. But stay away from let go. Let go, it means you did something.
Right. I'll tell you what, though, no matter what you call it, it always feels like you're fired.
Of course it does.
All
Of
right.
course it
So, Sheila, thank you so much to go over the key points. Follow the formula for your resume, which is quantify and heavy on the successes. And when you
Yes.
say bold and underline, you bold and underline that on your resume.
Yes,
Right?
those words, whatever words you use, and make sure that those exact words, key successes, achievements, whatever words you choose, bold, underline, bullets are okay there, and put that same word under every single position. Because as I'm scanning resumes, again, your resume will have all these amazing results in contrast of the other 300 that I've read that are just the monotonous bullets. You're going to stand out. You're
Right.
absolutely, and you're going to be easy to be hired.
So key successes, quantification, use that for the interview. When you go into an interview, say the words out loud so it's in your short-term memory.
Yes.
And if your career started before people had email, just use the last 15 years.
Well said.
Right. Well,
Absolutely.
I'm still keeping some of my old stuff on there because that's where some of my key successes were, but I'm going to take the dates off.
Awesome.
Sheila, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I think this will help a lot of people. And, there are 2 books. If you want to know more about it, she's the author of Hired and Unexpected Mentors. So you can get a lot more of Sheila's wisdom if you would like it. Thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you for having me.